into our final session for today, and that is a panel, and we are going to be talking about being at the edge. And I'm very pleased to welcome Tilly Gilbert, and she is Principal Consultant and Edge Practice Lead at STL Partners. And I'm going to sit on this panel too, but I think probably if I say the least, it might be best. We shall see. Anyway, over to you, Tilly. You're in charge now.
Hi, Annie. Thanks. Can everyone hear me okay?
We can. Well, I can.
Lovely, lovely. Hi, Ali, and hi, Joanna, as well. So really pleased to be here to moderate the panel session focused on 5G and its relevance and importance in the world of edge computing. I guess it might be nice for everyone just to hear briefly from my three panelists, just to introduce yourselves and your organization, and maybe to hear one or two sentences around your experience in the worlds of 5G and edge to get us started. I don't know, Annie, since you've already been part of the session, if you want to start, and then maybe Ali and Joanna.
Okay, well, thank you. So I'm Annie Turner. I'm editor of Mobile Europe, and our name, or brand name, is a little misleading because actually we cover Europe, the Middle East, and Africa, and also we talk about communications of all kinds. But it's a bit like Microsoft, you know, you don't change your name because nobody talks about microcomputers anymore. So I've been around writing about telecoms for a lot of years. Let's just leave it at that. And therefore, edge and 5G are subjects that we cover all the time because we're all about infrastructure and the business and operational models infrastructure and its technology enable.
Great. Ali, did you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Ali Moinuddin. I am the Managing Director of Uptime Institute here in Europe, as well as the Chief Corporate Development Officer for Uptime. I've been in the technology sector for over 25 years, having worked for a couple of telco operators and then moving to various service providers. At Uptime Institute, we have certified over 2,500 digital infrastructures on behalf of our clients. And when we talk about digital infrastructure, we're talking about data centers, which also include edge compute venues. From our client base, we have worked with just over 350 mobile, fixed line, co-location, and managed service providers. And certainly over the last 3 years, what we've seen is much more focus on edge computing per se, both by the mobile and the fixed line operators, and then moves by some of the hyperscalers and co-location companies to actually add additional services to their portfolio, which is really focused on providing edge computing environments for service providers and or application software development organizations to really kind of help them drive the value and the adoption of edge computing.
Amazing, thanks for that, and thanks for the bit of the overview of the market as well. And Joanna, last but not least, do you want to introduce yourself as well? I can't hear you. Here we go.
Hello, everybody. Nice to meet you. So I'm Joanna Newman. I work for Vodafone, and I've been focused on Edge for 5 years now, taking Edge from an idea, from research and development, all the way through to launch. We're launched in 2 or 3 countries at the moment because the third one's about to launch. And we also run an independent stack in a 4th country as well. So I spend a lot of my time talking about Edge in Vodafone. I used to be based in the UK, and I've moved over to Toronto this summer. So very nice to see you all. It's a bit early for me, so you'll see me having a cup of tea. It's about 8 o'clock in the morning, but it's a real pleasure to be here speaking with you and Ali and Annie. Thank you.
Thanks, Joanna. And maybe I'll stick with you for the first question to kick off the panel, which is just that we're focused on 5G at the edge. So it will be good to understand from the panel's perspective what the relationship between 5G and edge computing really is, how closely tied they are as technology, maybe where they're similar and different in terms of your perspective and your understanding of the the two technologies and how you're putting them into practice at Vodafone.
Sure, absolutely. And in my role in technology architecture and strategy, we've really been laying out the vision for what edge can be, both for what we want to do from a product market and what we sell to our customers, but also what we might want to be able to use internally as well. So if I talk about the capabilities and then their relationship to the wider technology there, obviously, edge computing is about bringing computing as close to the customer as possible. So as close to the location where the compute is desired to take place can be done. And that can be done through one of Ali's data centers. It can be done through one of my POPs or private networks, et cetera. We've got interconnects. There's lots of different ways that it can be done. When we talk about the relationship with the mobile technology, of course, 5G will enable a huge number of use cases that weren't available before, primarily in the private networking space. So that's where you've got a mobile private network, you've got some edge computing on site, and that enables that single digit latency for manufacturing use cases, mining use cases, et cetera. And we've had lots of great presentations this week on that. And 5G is really an accelerant to enable some of those use cases. When we think about edge computing in the 4G space, so this would be a distributed edge, so that's something that's available in a geographic footprint, and that geographic footprint is often, several hundred kilometers, several hundred square kilometers, so it's a big geographic footprint covering a major metro or capital city, etc. We're trying to ensure that the technology that is accessible to as many people as possible. So we've enabled it on 4G and 5G. Obviously, 5G offers us some super cool new things that we can do, but we can offer a consistent experience between the two. Now, when I think about one of the challenges of edge use cases for certain types of media and entertainment, which require a huge amount of uplink, it makes sense to think about having the uplink delivered over a fixed connection and having the downlink be beyond 5G or 4G as it is. So there's also a third use case that we're seeing real interest in the market for those that are data heavy, but only on one side and not the other, for sort of a hybrid use case as well, leveraging the fixed network and the mobile network as well. So that's what we're seeing from our customers. Thanks.
Thanks, Joanna. I don't know, Annie or Ali, that's going to be confusing, if either of you guys wanted to add anything to that in terms of your perspective on the interplay between these two technologies and kind of how they're being dealt with.
So certainly, if I may, certainly we're seeing, many of the use cases that have just been mentioned, particularly a lot of interest around smart cities, and then also manufacturing, where a huge requirement for mobile edge is required, driven from the mobile operators. Specifically, the focus for our customers is trying to identify mobile edge that can provide compute and storage for applications with network close to the end users. Typically within a boundary of the operator's network. These infrastructures are being built by many different organizations. Both fixed lines, mobile, but also some managed providers. They're all looking for low latency, high bandwidth device processing and data offload, as well as, and this is important, trusted compute storage, right? Where they can really rely on the resiliency of that infrastructure, because, as Joanna pointed out earlier, that infrastructure has to be highly resilient, because it could be supporting, will be supporting mission critical, but also life critical applications and services, right? So it's very, very important for those to be happening. We believe that one of the most important issues around edge computing is the network, right? Whether it's mobile or whether it's fixed. Increasingly we're seeing, more demand for near edge and far edge. So, much wider geographical distribution. So, that's where the mobile edge has a real role to play. Given that the market potential is, hundreds of billions, if not trillions, over the next decade or so. I think there's going to be many different approaches, many different partnerships developing, but all have to focus on enhancing the user experience, reducing the bandwidth and data transport costs, obviously, and managing the proliferation of sites. And that's where the partnerships can play a really important part.
So for me, I'd say Edge and 5G, they're often almost considered to be an inseparable pair, but actually Edge does not have to be about 5G. And Joanna, I was really interested in what you just said about the hybrid approach. So maybe combine mobile.
I've lost Annie.
And the application, I mean, that's the key, isn't it? I mean, let's not look for something we can do with 5G. Let's see what we're trying to do and then see if 5G is the best option. And I also think we need to start with simple things. I think we have a tendency to kind of overcomplicate things a bit. So I talked to the CFO of Verizon Business earlier this year, and I kind of like it when people, walk the walk as well as talk the talk. So he was telling me about the fact they've built a plant with Corning because they couldn't buy enough fiber. So they built their own plant. And one of the things they're doing, building out to the edge and experimenting with the edge, is that they are using, they've got templates of what the production line should look like at any given spot, and they constantly check against the template. And if anything, an image from the production line doesn't look okay, they stop the production line. Now, previously, and obviously it's in real time, previously they batch processed the images and matched them to the templates, which anything that was a defect, they chucked the whole spool of fiber optic away because it wasn't economic to try and look through it and find the fault. Now they stop the production line, fix it in situ, and it's just reduced the defect rates and wastage dramatically. And I think that's that's a really good demonstration of where 5G was a good option and the Edge is a good option, but Edge and 5G are not always the best options together.
I think that makes sense. Did you want to jump in, Joanna? Something?
I did. So Annie, I completely agree with you. And I think that one of the things that we do sometimes really well in technology and sometimes less well is be led by the use case. And there's so many different potential types of use cases for Edge, and there will never be one use case for Edge. There's 6 or 7 different locations where Edge can sit in the network. Ali's already talked about a few of them. I've talked about a couple of them as well. So looking for the golden unicorn Edge use case is sometimes a little bit of a waste of time, in my opinion. However, we do need to listen to what our customer problems actually are and what they think can be solved, and look at what we can solve today with the technologies available today, as well as making plans for what we can solve, problems that we can solve for them tomorrow based on technologies that will be available tomorrow. So I fully agree with Verizon Business CEO about their proposal to be customer led, and we're customer led as well. We've run the Edge Innovation Program for almost 2 years now, where we invite people to come and talk to us about what Edge is and really understand what solutions could be available to them. And this isn't about Vodafone selling solutions. I mean, of course, we do that as well. We're a big company. That's how we make money. But it's also about understanding and really helping the industry mature that wider ecosystem to enable those end-to-end use cases to really come to life. For example, there's one use case that Vodafone was a part of last year, which it actually took 8 organizations end-to-end to be able to deliver a location-based XR, so AR/VR use case on Edge. So it's the development and the maturity of that wider ecosystem as well that also helps dictate what those use cases are that can be done today and help people do them today, or what can be done in 18 months' time and how that can be done. Thanks.
So I think we've all sort of agreed, and you guys have summed up well, that we don't think that Edge is contingent on 5G, and we think they need to be treated, separately. I guess I would be keen to understand, what about the other way around though? So can 5G really deliver on a lot of the hyped performance characteristics in terms of latency and bandwidth and resiliency and data security? Can it really deliver on those performance characteristics without edge computing to support it? Or should we be expecting that as part of that 5G promise, there is going to need to be an underlying distributed compute sort of infrastructure to support that? What are your guys' take on that sort of other way round of thinking about it? I don't know if someone wants to jump in first.
Well, personally, I think 5G without edge is not going to deliver. I can't see how it can. And bearing in mind what my two fellow panelists have said already, that edge can mean, so many things. I mean, I quite like Neil McRae's description, which is it's where we engage with the customer, which, so no, I don't think 5G is going to fulfill its potential without edge.
Our view is that they are so interlinked and intertwined that in order to be able to build the biggest potential addressable market, you have to have that integrated proposition, as it were, where you're going to have distributed compute, and certainly what we in order to meet some of the edge cases, right? Particularly around manufacturing, and certainly what we're seeing in the Middle East, smart cities, where all of the compute is not in data centers, it's in smart buildings, right? And then what happens, and certainly what we've also seen is dependent on the form factor of the so-called edge infrastructure, that can be a central enterprise data center or cloud database, cloud data center, which could be 100 megawatts. We've heard of organizations defining those as edge infrastructure or edge compute venues, going down to near edge, which is perhaps under a megawatt, far edge between 5 to 300 kilowatt. Then you have the edge devices. You're going to have the mobile edge in order to get as close to the customer as possible. So certainly I think both will feed off each other, right? The success of the applications and the compute, and the ability to deliver low latency, a better customer experience through the mobile service provider will drive the whole market forward.
And if I just add to that, when I think about how we present 5G and edge, or present 5G, we talk about the capabilities that will be delivered by edge. So, Annie, Ali, you're absolutely right. They're intertwined in the minds of our customers. Obviously, there are some capabilities that are delivered by 5G that have nothing to do with edge, right? But the concept of the edge capabilities that we talk about, the low latency, the distributed compute, et cetera, that is really going to be delivered when 5G is fully delivered. But I want to make sure that we don't trap ourselves accidentally into thinking that edge isn't available until that's fully done, that it's dependent on other capabilities to be delivered before edge can even get started. Excuse me, sorry, I'm getting over a cold. It's something that we can do today on the network today, and is actively running in all sorts of parts of the world. And that's not just the Vodafone opinion, but that's the Verizon opinion, the NTT Docomo, SKTel, et cetera. We're all operating edge today, enabling a lot of the use cases that are discussed. Now, I think when we talk about ultra low latency or smart, true smart cities and cities as opposed to large metros, or safety critical applications, that will require more underlying technology to be delivered to be able to bring those to life. Thanks.
And
yeah. Certainly on that, we're working with a very big Spanish operator who basically have rolled out a edge infrastructure, 5G edge infrastructure. But what they're looking at is a staggered launch, which really focuses on use case and commercial discussions that they are having with enterprise customers, and certainly those are focused on specific large scale metros, the business case is to test and to verify, to make sure that that the customers will come, right? Not just the trial or the beta customers, and then certainly then the board will invest in a much bigger rollout.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point, Ali, and something that is talked about sometimes but isn't really stressed. The level of investment of to be able to bring this to life, it's all front end and it's all substantial capex. So there's a little bit of a view of build it and they will come, which is great. And we've seen that work in some of the hyperscalers and some of the other technology companies that telecoms companies aspire to be. But also we have a responsibility to our shareholders to be able to spend our funds accordingly. So it's a very fine line to invest enough to prove the capabilities without being reckless. Or not necessarily reckless, but mistiming investment, and so pulling investment forward where perhaps it could have been delayed. Thanks.
And just to understand, because I think generally when we've been talking about 5G and Edge so far, when we've talked about what 5G can bring for Edge, it's mainly been, I think, from a use case perspective. So, there are some use cases, that need really low latency where maybe 5G is going to be better suited than 4G or other mobile technology. But is it fair to say, and maybe this is one for you, Joanna, is it fair to say that there's also, in terms of telecoms operators re-architecting their networks to make sure that local breakout is actually possible at the edge, that there are, while that is possible with a 4G network and you can have distributed EPC and do local breakouts, that there are some benefits of thinking about this as part of a 5G strategy in terms of just how you actually, enable the traffic to break out locally and what a 5G architecture is delivering there versus a 4G architecture, just to understand maybe that perspective alongside the use case perspective in terms of where 5G can play a role with Edge.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and that's a great question and a great point. We need to spend our capex and our time. It's thinking about the opportunity cost. So we need to enable enough on 4G to not shut down the innovation of the edge use cases. But primarily our investment and our focus is in the 5G world. We play such a substantial role in the standards organizations and the various consortia and groups to help drive that standard architecture as well. That's one of the things that Vodafone is focused on. So internally we're focused on it, and also externally as well, because we're stronger when we operate in harmony. Thanks.
So I wondered if I could ask Joanna, although I'm not the moderator, and it's kind of very aligned with what you just asked, and that is about to be able to, if you'll forgive the expression, pop the edge out, where you need it for a whole range of applications. I mean, really, because if you build, we build it and they'll come, you're in real trouble if they don't, given the amount of capex. So, I mean, is that about, is it key is having that 5G standalone network architecture in place so that when you need to build an edge out, then it's a case of, it's largely replication. Most of it's there. It's just the kind of configuration or customization on the top rather than a kind of huge build.
Yeah, and that's one of the attractions of 5G SA. But I'm a little more of an old school transformation gal. I think you start with the capabilities that are in place today, the capabilities that will be in place imminently, whilst also tracking towards the scenario where 5G SA is available everywhere in every market. We know from other studies that if you see research papers that were saying 5G SA would be everywhere in all markets by 2020, that hasn't materialized yet. So I'm a little more old school on the transformation journey. I'm much more interested in making sure that the wider market, and that's for Vodafone to consume as well as what we sell to consumers and to enterprises, to be able to consume edge and really drive that wider innovation. And of course, we have to be pragmatic about what we can do now and what we can do in the future. We also, because Vodafone is such a collection of entities, we operate fully as Vodafone in 28 different markets, and we've got 60 further partner markets. I need to be respectful of the fact that not every market has the same investment strategy or the capital that's available to it, which is why I'm speaking in more general terms. Vodafone's the second largest mobile company in the world, right? So we have to speak more generally. In some markets, 5G SA will be online. In some markets, it's already there. In some markets, it's on its way. But I need to take a look at what's available across the whole Vodafone footprint in my role. Thanks.
If I may add, I mean, the ideal scenario would be a 5G mesh network, right, that everybody could piggyback on. But we're all commercial organizations. We want, we have our focus on our customers. But over time, who knows, in a decade. But certainly to be able to stand up a edge infrastructure today is much cheaper than it was 20 years ago, right? Because there's so many more compute venues that you could put a pop in, and there's more and more shared infrastructure across mobile operators as well as fixed line. So I think over time the market will evolve as the edge market evolves. Some organizations are predicting it as multiple trillions of dollars. That is going to drive innovation, and that's going to drive partnerships. So over time, I think being able to deploy edge at the far edge will become easier and less expensive.
Mm-hmm. No, that makes sense. I think Joanna, yeah.
Could I just pop in for a second to talk about the third leg of this, or maybe the fourth? Sorry, I can't count. We talk often about the technology capability of the operators. We talk about the capabilities of organizations like Uptime to certify these stacks and locations. We talk about where the customers are leading us, so it is for. But we also need to talk about the standards that we're regulated by, right? So if you go on to any hyperscaler website, any of the ones that you want to choose from in the world, now all of the top 10 will have something called SOC 2 compliance for your user data. And SOC 2 compliance is a very old school data center spec, whereby I need to supply 6 feet around every rack to ensure that nobody can stick their arms in. Mesh has to be small enough that fingers can't go in. It needs to be resilient for people trying to drive into the building, et cetera, which is all fine, right? This is about protecting customer data. But there is really an opportunity to, and I think there are some discussions underway already, to look at modernizing that to reflect the fact that there's more logical security that's available as opposed to just old school physical security, which is how we protected stuff in the 90s. So once SOC 2 and those other regulations by which we either are forced to comply with or want to comply with because our customers want to comply with them, will give a lot more flexibility for edge to move into smaller data centers, to be co-located with one another in maybe an Uptime facility or an Equinix facility, et cetera. And all of a sudden, edge becomes more available in lots of places that start to enable those safety critical use cases, et cetera, because you've got a proliferation of edge floating around to be able to do that. So it's definitely something that from a transformation capability perspective requires investment on the operator side and investment on the data center side and some world leading research from people like STL and all of the work that Annie does. But we also need to drag the compliance arm along with us. And I think that we as an industry could spend a little more time focusing on understanding what their challenges are and trying to help them along to make that happen, to really bring edge to life. Because even once 5G SA was there, once all the smart buildings in the world was there, unless they're sized to be able to prevent, and I'm just talking about some of the physical security requirements and spacing requirements, there just won't be enough space in the city to be able to do that. Thanks.
Well, just on that. So I think you've nailed one of the biggest issues in the market in terms of edge infrastructure. There's many definitions, as I've talked about earlier, but also there's many different vying standards. and approaches to kind of really understanding how to build a highly resilient edge infrastructure. And you're 100% on the mark when you talk about it is different to a data center. Edge infrastructure, a lot of them may not have backup power. They may have limited power, battery capabilities. They're not going to be manned. So there's additional security requirements around that. So, over the last year or so, we've been engaged with some market participants around trying to build a comprehensive and standardized approach to really understanding infrastructure resilience, which actually takes into account the resiliency which is inherent in the network, right? As well as the other control measures you can apply within the IT stack, within the POP. So, certainly it's an ongoing discussion, and would be happy to hear from anybody who'd be willing to participate in that discussion.
So that's just, Ali, made me think of something. We tend to think about edge and 5G as about low latency, particularly. And I think actually one of the big things that it brings to the party should be a hugely improved reliability. And I think we do tend to focus on speed and latency, and that's, it's not so interesting and not so exciting somehow, but actually that's maybe the most critical of all, really.
Yeah. And data sovereignty as well, right? There are so many requirements for data sovereignty, and one of the benefits of processing of doing whatever needs to be done close to you is that unless you're standing on the border between two countries, it's likely going to be processed within the country that you're in, right?
Certainly, and just 2 points on that. We work very closely with the financial regulators here in Europe and North America, LATAM, etc. And certainly in Europe, what we're seeing is much more focus on financial regulators demanding on-soil transaction, right? So this edge compute combined with mobile network infrastructure could really help organizations who are a regulated entity, whether it's a regional or a country-specific regulated entity, much more focused on where the data is at all times, and curtailing of the use of compute venues which are outside of regions. So that's going to drive edge infrastructure, we believe, for financial services significantly over the next 3 to 5 years. The other point I'd like to make is we've been looking at outages for over 25 years. We publish a research paper every year on trends in outages. Over the last 5 years, what we've started to see is more outages within data centers created by software and network infrastructure. But that network infrastructure is predominantly fixed line, right, or private fiber. Certainly, I think that again, there's a role for the network operators to help in improving the resiliency of data centers, and that could be done through edge infrastructure, right?
Okay, and I know that so far in this discussion, Joanna, you mentioned at the beginning that there is both an interest in 5G and edge from a public 5G network plus a network edge site, and then also this certainly something that I'm having lots of conversations about right now, and I think is really quite hot at the moment, which is more of the combined on-prem edge with a private 5G, or at least a private network opportunity. And I guess we've probably focused a little bit more on the public network side of things and network edge sites so far. So I'd be keen to get the panelists' perspectives on what that opportunity is from a private 5G and on-prem edge opportunity, and maybe where you see kind of the focus and the key players being on that side of things as well.
Sure. So from a Vodafone perspective, private networks with 5G is on fire. Taking advantage of our global IoT network as well, the opportunities coming through are just enormous. So we've already seen, if I think about stepping outside of Vodafone and more from an industry perspective, we've already seen things like big mining companies. I think Vodafone won Rio Tinto, and there's several others in the world there that are really using private 5G, mobile private network with 5G, and it's really an absolute game changer for them. In some respects, the use cases for that are far more developed. The customer need is more developed, and actually the sales funnel is more refined. So they're more into the view of, let's run a trial and understand what it is. Let's use the trial to generate information to support the business case to invest us doing that. And so it's much more developed in the I'm seeing mining, I'm seeing mining and other heavy industries, oil refinery, et cetera. I'm also seeing a lot in manufacturing, specifically around manufacturing of large things like automobiles or other large devices. There's definitely some interest from the military in that as well, for manufacturing or for some other things too. So it's very well developed. Where I'm not seeing private 5G at the moment, which was one of the things where we thought it would be coming, and I think it's on its way, is around campuses and smart cities. And I think that linking back to what Ali said at the beginning, where he's seeing lots of smart buildings in place, I think that's on its way, but it hasn't quite materialized into a sales funnel yet that I'm seeing.
Yeah, totally agree with that. I mean, the smart cities that I was talking about are the ones that are currently being built in the Middle East, where they've got a lot of money to throw, and yeah, even obviously the line which is being built in KSA, which is going to require a huge amount of IoT, a huge amount of they're running everything. Everything is going to be automated, transport networks, the infrastructure, the transport networks, the infrastructure, the public services, etc. So that's all going to be IoT enabled, which will drive certainly the market forward in that region. I mean, in Europe, what we're starting to see is also away from manufacturing, which has historically always been pretty IoT intensive, and is getting more so. We're seeing more services companies starting to deploy lightweight VR or AR headsets. So they're using 5G to help reduce the total cost of service, right? Whereby they don't have to send 2 or 3 people; they can send 1 person. And they're really driving significant improvements in their service delivery as well as customer satisfaction, and reducing the bottom line cost. So certainly the services sector, and then as we would have seen, the data center sector historically, they've always wanted to do things in a very specific way, but more and more so, automation is now acceptable, virtual services are more acceptable, and certainly the regulators have cottoned on to the fact that the market has evolved. Infrastructure is supporting a very different world than it was 10 years ago, and now they're kind of updating the legislation to account for that.
So I thought it was interesting when I was talking to someone, to my shame, I cannot remember who, at Deutsche Telekom, and a while ago, and he was just saying that the hyperscalers have 5 kind of points of presence data centers in Germany, and I forgot how many they said they had that could be endpoints, if you like, edge points, but it was very many multiples of 5, so I think it's kind of a really different ball game, isn't it, with the on-prem and the public and private. I mean, I just cannot see that in most situations there's going to be a sandwich, if you like, between the public, and the private, at the very least, a hybrid, if not totally on-prem and private. It was interesting last year as well, talking to a lot of operators about them shifting their telco cloud onto public networks, and it was just a really big no. And so that
public cloud.
Yeah, and in that context, I think that was the network, not the IT and stuff like analytics, the network. And I just feel there that that's not necessarily about using different technology. It's just about ownership and control.
Okay. Yeah, cool. So we have maybe just a couple of minutes left, and I think this is actually the final session of the event. So yeah, so want to make sure that we wrap up really, really well and with a bang. So I guess what I would be keen to understand as a bit of a final point and question for each of the panelists that we have here is just about where are we at the market in terms of sort of state of play of the market when it comes to edge. And it's something that we've been talking about for quite a few years now, but that, you know, there's still work to be done before we can really say that it's a scaled and commercialized proposition. And so it would be good to understand from you guys when you think that inflection point for edge is, and maybe you can challenge me and say it's already happened, but I'd be interested to know what your guys' perspectives are in terms of, you know, what we can expect from the market and when we can expect to see this maturing, and maybe even how tied or not that is to kind of what others are doing in 5G and the speed that that's maturing as well. So yeah, over to you guys for kind of a final comment and wrap up on a rather big question.
So shall I go first? So if I think about where Vodafone is and how we're positioning ourselves, and again, we've got the Edge Innovation Program, which invites people to come and talk to us about how this can be done and really maturing that wider market. We are definitely in the early adoption phase of the growth curve. And we've all seen what the growth curve of an early adoption phase looks like. It looks, you know, almost straight up. And we're definitely there at the moment. And I expect us to be there for a couple of years to come as that wider ecosystem that really brings those use cases to life emerges. And on the mobile private network space, we're a little further up, but we're still on that early adoption curve. So this is the beginning of a technology that's really going to be used in depth, at pace, for years and years to come, and we just need to ride the wave, really. Thanks.
I would agree with that. We believe there's going to be hundreds and thousands of edge endpoints globally. I think we're kind of young adults in our journey, as it were. So we're just, you know, we've got our first job, we've got getting some experience, and then, you know, within the next 3 to 5 years, we're going to see a significant uptick, just driven by not just the developed world, but also the developing world, where they're investing a significant amount on mobile infrastructure, and they don't have the legacy to deal with, right? Or the legacy infrastructure to deal with. So, you know, certainly a huge opportunity in front of us.
So I think what's going to happen is what I've seen in my years working in telecoms happen a lot, that for ages and ages and ages and ages and ages, nothing much seems to happen, and we kind of get bored. And then there's this woof, you know, it all takes off, and it almost kind of catches us by surprise because we'd taken our eye off it because we got bored. So that's what I think is going to happen. And I think Ali and Joanna probably 2 to 5 years, although it'll vary from place to place and from sector to sector. But yeah, that's what I expect. Nothing happens and whoosh.
I mean, just if you look at what happened on the co-location managed service, co-location sector, so a multi-tenant data center sector, you know, there was a significant forward investment 20 years ago, but then there was a retraction over the last 15 years. Just because, you know, because of the evolution in technology, that's just driven a huge wave of growth. And the difference is now there's actually end customers and use cases that are wholly reliant on, not wholly, but are significantly reliant on edge, but would become wholly reliant on edge infrastructure over the next 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, and then if I just look back to my previous point, being able to use that wider telecom infrastructure to provide mobile private networks or distributed networks to take advantage of the footprint that DT has and Vodafone has and all the major operators have. You know, we've got places where we could put this stuff in lots of locations, but we need to bring the compliance industry along with us as well to be able to do that. It's a really exciting space, and there's more to come.
Amazing. Well, I look forward to the whoosh, as you put it, Annie. Is there anything that you want to say to wrap up the event for today?
But for the first thing I'd like to do before wrapping up is to thank the three of you. I thought that panel was really interesting and fun. So thank you for your input. We hope to see you all back at a future event. That would be just terrific. We've had a bit of a ball over the last 3 days. We've covered an immense amount of ground. I am going to be going back and revisiting the videos once they're available on demand online after we've edited them down into individual sessions, because I think there's been such an extraordinary wealth and breadth of information. There's, you know, a real treasure chest in there. And I think we're progressing than we have done for 2 or 3 years. Well, not surprising given the you-know-whats that held us all up somewhat. But it does have a feeling of becoming a much more exciting space than it was, which is just great. It'll keep us all in work for years. Anyway, on that note, thank you to 3 of you very much. Thank everybody who attended and contributed in any way. Especially to our sponsors and all of our speakers and all of our panelists. That was just terrific. And just to remind you that we've got Talking Telecoms Week coming up between the 28th and the 2nd of December. So check out, there's some really terrific videos will be available during that week from absolutely top people. In the meantime, thank you very much, and wherever you are in the world and whatever time of day it is, have a good one.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.